Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football content. If you like what we've been doing this week and throughout the offseason, make sure to give the video a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. With that said, we've got a lot of free agency news, so let's jump into our first story. So this happened last night after I recorded yesterday's video, but Calvin Ridley signed with the Titans, a big contract. 4 years, $92 million, $50 million guaranteed. Not what I expected. I thought he'd go to the Jaguars or the Patriots, but this is an absolutely massive contract and way bigger than I think either of those teams were willing to pay. The Titans were desperate to add receiving weapons around Will Levis. So as for Ridley, we know that he missed most of 2021 and 2022 with his mental health issues and then the gambling suspension. But on the Falcons, he was pretty solid. 64 catches, 821 yards, 10 touchdowns as a rookie. Then 63 catches, 866 yards, and 7 touchdowns in 2019. And of course, 2020, his big year, 90 catches, 1,374 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Everyone thought he was going to be a superstar after that year. It's the only year he really served as the clear wide receiver one after the decline of Julio Jones. Unfortunately, after 2 years off, Ridley came back. He was good in 2023, but not nearly the same as 2020. 76 catches, 1,016 yards, and 8 touchdowns. It kind of seemed closer to what we were getting in 2018 or 2019 than in 2020. I do not think that Calvin Ridley is really an alpha wide receiver one in the NFL. I just don't think so. He got this kind of money because he was the best wide receiver on the free agent market, and he had scarcity on his side. There was no one else. There was no other really great wide receiver on the free agent market. He was the only one. He turns 29 during the 2023-2024 season in December. Additionally, I have another concern with Calvin Ridley, and it's why this is not my favorite landing spot. Let's take a look at Calvin Ridley's 2023 stats versus DeAndre Hopkins' 2023 stats. So here's Calvin Ridley, again, 76 catches, 1,016 yards, 8 touchdowns. Let's go to DeAndre Hopkins. 75 catches, 1,057 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Almost identical line. However, Calvin Ridley had his stats with Trevor Lawrence. DeAndre Hopkins had to play with Ryan Tannehill and rookie year Will Levis. So, I'm very concerned. I don't think this is a good landing spot. Going back to the Jaguars would have been the best. Or, something, a dark horse like the Chiefs. You never know. So, for me, Ridley Dynasty value, he was kind of in the bottom of a tier. So he moved down about 9 to 10 overall spots to the top of the next tier of wide receivers. So he did move down for me, but, from one tier to the next instead of among wide receivers. Big loser, DeAndre Hopkins. I actually didn't really expect them to add someone like Calvin Ridley. I don't see how DeAndre Hopkins, who was just okay last year for fantasy, I would lean that Ridley's the wide receiver one. I don't think Will Levis is going to support a zillion wide receivers. So he's a big loser for me. And then, unfortunately, Treylon Burks, I moved him down even more. Wide receiver 51 to wide receiver 56. I don't see much hope for Burks here. But remember, he flashed as a rookie. He has first-round draft capital. Kind of player who could break out later in their career based on his college profile. If you could trade a late third for Burks, I actually don't hate it. I don't hate it. There are worse things you could do with a late third. You're not going to get that kind of profile in the rookie draft. So that's kind of what I would do there. And then I didn't even bother to include him, but Chigakonkwo, targets are just not there. So he's totally buried at this stage. Now, next news story, and this just happened. I literally pushed back the recording of the show to add this to the show sheet. Sam Howell traded to the Seahawks. I got to say, wow, it is not what I expected. I thought that the Seahawks would trade for Justin Fields. I really did. I thought that they would give Geno Smith a chance to start at the beginning, and then if it did not go well, they would put in Justin Fields. They did do that kind of plan, but with Sam Howell, which I didn't really understand. They traded, and it was a decent amount that they paid, depending on how you look at it. Howell, pick 102 and pick 179 for picks 78 and 152. So to visualize it, the Commanders gave up Howell. They got back 2 pick swaps, third from a fourth, and a fifth from a sixth. So not a bad return. It's more than the Mac Jones trade, for example, in my opinion. Howell is less of a challenge to Geno Smith than Fields would have been. I do think that if it goes really bad, Sam Howell will end up playing some games in 2024. If it goes well, he won't. I think he's a backup, but a little bit more of a competitor than like Mac Jones to Trevor Lawrence, for example. It's not a bad move by the Seahawks. They didn't really have access to a rookie quarterback. 16 was going to be too low to get any of the high-end guys. And then their other picks were 78, and they also have 81 overall in round 3. They weren't going to get Nix or Penix there. So I think their quarterback room is set for 2024. It'll be Geno Smith and Sam Howell. And Howell was pretty good for the disaster he was in. 63.4% completion, 21 touchdowns, 21 interceptions, 6.4 yards per attempt. He did add a lot rushing, and he had passing volume. The offense sucked. The team sucked. The coaching staff sucked. Everything sucked. So, I see how someone could look at Sam Howell and say there's potential. I moved him up a couple of spots in my dynasty ranks. Similar upside to Jameis Winston, but I think there's more likely that Howell gets on the field than Winston, with even better weapons if he does, and more intriguing than Jacoby Brissett. So I moved him up from quarterback 32 to quarterback 30. Those are the two quarterbacks that he passed. Next up, another weird trade today, and this one was even stranger. Desmond Ridder traded for Rondale Moore. Pretty simple. Falcons receive Rondale Moore. Cardinals receive Desmond Ridder. Rare player-for-player trade with no picks involved. There's not too much to talk about here, though. The Cardinals needed a real backup to Kyler Murray after Clayton Tune didn't work out. Ridder has starting experience. He's on a cheap rookie deal for 2 more years. It's a good move. As for the Cardinals wide receiver room, they need major help. 3 of their 5 top target earners are gone or maybe gone. Zach Ertz is gone. Rondale Moore is now gone. And Hollywood Brown is a free agent. They retained Greg Dortch. They still have Michael Wilson, but they need more than one wide receiver. I'm really hoping they bring Brown back. Maybe draft Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, kind of fill out their wide receiver room that way. If this gives you any sell window on Greg Dortch, who has done nothing really for 4 years, take it. Michael Wilson, same thing. Take it. He didn't do enough for me as a rookie. As for Moore on the Falcons, I hear some people hyping him. Please ignore that. This is Rondale Moore's career. 54 catches in year 1, 435 yards. 41 catches in year 2, 414 yards. 40 catches in year 3, 352 yards, 1 receiving touchdown each year. And he's had one of the most interesting things was this rushing volume. Will there be rushing volume on the Falcons behind Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier? No. So, yeah. Not interested in Rondale Moore. Wide receiver 72 down to wide receiver 76. He's falling into the roster clogger, cut territory if the Falcons draft another wide receiver, which they might. Now, we have a few minor pieces of news that I held back because I thought Calvin Ridley was going to sign in one of these places, but he didn't. So we can go through them now. Kendrick Bourne earlier in the week re-signed with the Patriots. 3 years up to $33 million. Really just $19 million with incentives, $5.5 million guaranteed. They already retained Hunter Henry. They have DeMario Douglas. These are placeholders. They need more weapons. But I did mention Bourne on a recent Dynasty Stash episode. He was good last year. He had 37 catches for 406 yards and a touchdown in just 8 games. He had 4.6 catches and 50.8 yards per game. He was the Patriots' clear wide receiver 1 during that time. He's worth the Dynasty roster spot. Don't pay anything for him. He was on waivers. He shouldn't have been. If you have him, just hang on to him. You never know when you're going to need a spot start kind of player you want in the back of your roster who was fantasy usable at times last year. But there's not much more to say about Kendrick Bourne. Next up, Gabe Davis signed with the Jaguars. 3 years, I guess is the replacement to Calvin Ridley. 3 years, $39 million with incentives up to $50 million. I'll say this. If Gabe Davis couldn't do it as Josh Allen's number 2 wide receiver, I don't see why it's going to be better here. I don't think that the Jaguars are done. Right now, they have Gabe Davis. Christian Kirk is 1. Gabe Davis is 2. They have Zay Jones, probably a cap casualty, but we'll see. Evan Ingram is their tight end. They also signed Devin Duvernay. They still have Parker Washington on their back of their roster. I just don't get this contract. I don't know why teams waste money like this. The money's nice, but yeah, if there's any hype on Gabe Davis, I would sell him. I hear some people saying Gabe Davis is great now that he's a Jaguar. I didn't move him in my ranks. And honestly, I think that's kind of generous. I probably should have moved him down. There were just other players who moved down, so he kind of stayed where he was. If you can get any, I guess my actionable takeaway on Gabe Davis is you can get any second round pick for Gabe Davis, take it and move on. You will never, ever, ever, ever be able to trust him in your fantasy lineup, ever. Next news story. And I just found this one funny. Joe Flacco signed with the Colts 1 year up to $8.7 million, $4.5 million guaranteed. Flacco will serve as Anthony Richardson's backup. It would be very funny if Richardson, not to say it's funny if a player gets hurt, but literally you would have to write a 100% different offense for Joe Flacco than Anthony Richardson. You couldn't have anything in common. So it's very rare to see a backup so different from the starter. So I just think that that's interesting. But it's good money for Joe Flacco. I love to see that he's continuing his career. Kind of sad that he didn't go back to the Browns, but we saw Gardner Minshew have success on the Colts last year. If Joe Flacco has to go in, I think he'll be fantasy usable. So in Dynasty Superflex leagues, make sure that he is on the back of someone's roster. These are the kind of players you need during the year. Quarterback attrition is just so strong. And ditto here for Marcus Mariota. Signed with the Commanders 1 year, $6 million. The money signifies that he's the backup. And I will say this. We all know that Sam Howell and Drake May overlapped at North Carolina. Howell is now gone. It's reading tea leaves, but it seems like Washington is leading more towards Jaden Daniels at 2 from their minor moves. Marcus Mariota, if I had to pick, is more similar to Jaden Daniels as a player than he is to Drake May. So I would lean that Jaden Daniels is the one at 2. I would much rather the player going to the Commanders than the Patriots, who have no weapons. So I've kind of said that I like both prospects, and I'll probably choose between Drake May and Jaden Daniels, whichever one goes to the Commanders over the one who goes to the Patriots. Sticking with that, it's looking like it's going to be Jaden Daniels at 2, and Marcus Mariota will serve as his backup. Again, roster him in Superflex leagues. You have nothing to lose. Similarly, Drew Lock signs with the Giants, 1 year, $5 million. It's fully guaranteed. I think the Giants probably are done at quarterback. I expect them to take a wide receiver at 6. They'll run it back for 1 more year with Jones as the starter, Lock as the backup. It's a lot of money to guarantee to a quarterback that could be a quarterback 3. I don't think they're going to take a quarterback. I don't think they're trading up for a quarterback. I think that, if they do, that would surprise me. And with Daniel Jones' propensity to get hurt, Drew Lock could easily find himself on the field with a new weapon. So similarly to the other quarterbacks, make sure he's rostered in your Superflex league. And ditto, do it all over again here. Mason Rudolph signed with the Titans, 1 year up to $3.62 million. A little bit of a lower contract. But it means that he's the backup to Will Levis. I think Malik Willis will be out of town or cut. He's just irrelevant at this stage. And Mason Rudolph was decent in 2023. 74.9% completion, 719 yards and 3 touchdowns and 3 starts. It's pretty good. So I liked the move to get someone more similar to Will Levis as the backup. Malik Willis and Will Levis have just nothing in common with their play style. So it's a good move for the Titans. Get a veteran backup who started some games in 2023 and was pretty good. But there's not much else to say other than that. Few more minor stories. Some pretty minor. Gerald Everett signed with the Bears. I don't really get it. 2 years, $12 million, up to $14 million with incentives, $6.1 million guaranteed. It's a big contract for someone you don't intend to use. So are they planning to play a significant amount of 12 personnel? Maybe. I'm kind of stunned Everett didn't sign as a nominal starter. He looked good on the field with the Chargers last year. 51 catches is actually a lot for a tight end. 411 yards, 3 touchdowns. But I have no interest in him in this spot. He moved down 16 spots in Dynasty, totally irrelevant. As for Cole Kmet, I think this has a tiny effect on him. Not much, but it's a big contract not to use Gerald Everett. I am a little bit worried that they're going to add more wide receivers, especially one at 9 in the draft. So I did move Kmet down 1 spot in Dynasty from this signing, but not a super big deal. Next one, Mike Gesicki, and we'll close on Mike Gesicki. He signed with the Bengals. 1 year, $3.25 million. And I think the biggest thing is that the Bengals were on record saying that They wanted one tight end to play the majority of snaps. They didn't want their committee that they've been using forever. I'm just really disappointed this wasn't Noah Fant. I really wanted this to be the spot for Noah Fant. Someone really athletic, someone who could get involved in the passing offense. I thought with Joe Burrow, he would really have a chance to excel there. Instead, it's Mike Gesicki, who I did mention on a Dynasty stash video. I thought he had a chance to sign somewhere like this, raise some Dynasty value. Gesicki should not be on your Dynasty waivers. We know T. Higgins is potentially on the trading block. We know Joe Burrow's a great player. So tight ends in the Bengals offense have had success over the past few years. So if you can add him for free only, I would suggest doing it. But I only moved him up to tight end 28. So if anyone gives you any third round pick for Gesicki, any third, 2026 third even, I would take it and move on because he has no real value. If you're only going to get a fourth, just hang on to Gesicki. Maybe you'll get a spot start here and there. Now, I want to thank everyone for sticking through for this entire video. Probably come back tomorrow with one more to wrap up all the rest of the news. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. That's the best way to support the algorithm on these YouTube videos. And additionally, if you want to see all of these rankings that I talked about, my trade value chart, my rookie ranks, and participate in the Patreon Discord, you can sign up right up there at patreon.com/fantasyadvice. And additionally, of course, patrons get to ask advanced questions for the YouTube. We'll probably cover some of those tomorrow in addition to next week as we settle down from all the free agency. But I appreciate everyone who signs up for the Patreon because that's the best way to support me and my content. But until next time, I want to thank everyone for watching, and I will see you all later. Peace out.